What's going on, everybody? Dan Page here with the Applied Podcast, here with my friend John Cartwright from Liberty University up in Lynchburg, Virginia. Thank you so much for being with us today. And I'm looking forward to digging in here with some good conversation. So
Sure, let's go.
Welcome to Sarasota, Florida.
Thank you.
I bet you it's warmer than where you're at.
It's raining at the moment here, so actually it's warmer back home, but that's very rare.
Okay, all right. But the beaches are still
Oh,
nice.
yeah, no contest.
So how long have you been on this trip? You've been here since Thursday.
We got here Thursday, yeah. It's
Nice.
our second time down.
What have you done? Anything fun? Just the beach?
Well, we're my wife and I, honestly, we are beach people. So if we have beaches, we're good.
Yeah.
Like there really doesn't have to be a whole lot out. Beach and food,
and that's
and
it.
then the beach,
Yeah.
and then we're good.
And then you're good. So let's get into it a little bit. I want to talk about family and just like, I know you have a wonderful wife, Kristen, and then
Yes.
you have 4 kids that are all Liberty attendees, minus one that's going to be eventually.
Correct.
So tell me a little bit about their names, where they're
Yeah.
at, what they're studying, and
Sure.
just, did you have an influence on them going to Liberty?
Well, yeah, that's an easy one, yes. And Liberty's been part of our family since I was 2. My dad was in the first Master of Divinity class in the seminary, and helped start the football program, and we might talk about that more later. But so Liberty's just been part of my DNA. I went there as a student, stayed for graduate school, and then we've been back in Lynchburg since late 2009. So by far the longest place we've stayed in our marriage, 6 years in Miami, 6 years in New York, and now 15 years in Lynchburg. But we have 4 amazing kids. Our daughter's actually not a student. She's married to an Army guy.
Okay.
And they gave us our first grandson this past December.
Congratulations.
And thank you. It's it's a whole new world for us, but we love it.
It's better.
It's better because you have all of the fun with none of the stuff you didn't like about parenting. So when a diaper needs to be changed, you just pass back to mom and say, here you go.
Nice.
Our second born is Chase. He's going into his 3rd year at Liberty. He's studying cybersecurity there. Our third born is Ethan. He's wrapping up high school now, starting at Liberty in the fall, wants to also study cybersecurity. I don't know where the computer science gene came from. Neither my wife and I are math folks.
Yeah.
So we helped them build their first desktops, and it just kind of grew from there.
They were probably researching like best income jobs out there in 2025.
Yeah, it's a highly employable position.
Oh, yeah.
If you've got the mind for it, and they do. It's a lot of. I look at their degree plan and the amount of math they have to take, and it wouldn't even be an option for me, even if I wanted to.
Yeah.
Our youngest is Asher. He's 13, going into 8th grade. And to answer your last question, first of all, Liberty University is amazing. And I know this is not a commercial for Liberty, but it's their whole philosophy of what they do is we're about training people for ministry, but we're way more than that. Our founder's vision was training champions for Christ. And so no matter what field you're entering, whether you want to be a lawyer or a real estate agent or a pastor, you ought to do it in a way that where you can be an ambassador for Christ. And so we've never been just like, you've heard of the Bible college where everybody's training for ministry. That's what they do, and that's fine. Right. That's just not who Liberty is. We certainly train a lot of people for ministry, but it's much bigger than that. And as an employer, Liberty is great. Our kids can go, because I'm full-time there, tuition free.
Which is nice.
Yeah, and it makes it a pretty attractive, almost exclusive option.
As a parent especially. Yes,
oh, yeah. And when you understand what kind of loan burden people are taking to finish school, and it's nice. It was a big part of why we went there, honestly, just a vision for, we love Liberty, but this is also something that we can offer our kids. So they have this option without having to take on major loans to get degrees. So it's been good.
Originally from Philly?
Yeah, technically, actually, I was born in Rhode Island while my dad was in the Navy, but I was raised in Philadelphia from 4 years old on.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And your whole life spent in Philly? I mean, you said your dad was in the Army. Did you bounce around from Philly, or did you?
No, by the time Rhode Island was his last duty station, he went to the Naval Academy in the 60s, did his years of service that come with joining the Service Academy.
Yeah.
Every branch does that.
Good old Annapolis,
yes,
Maryland.
the schooling is free, but then you have your
6 years.
I think it's 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Anyway, by the time he finished, he did not re-sign.
Right.
He wanted to start a church and be a pastor. That was his heart. And so he actually got a phone call from a former football coach. Hey, I'm starting a football program at a brand new college in Lynchburg. At the time, it was Lynchburg Baptist College. And my dad said, Coach, I appreciate you thinking about me, but all I want to do is go somewhere where I can prepare for ministry. And he said, well, good news. They're starting a seminary. This was 1973, 2 years after Lynchburg Baptist College, which became Liberty University, began. So my dad went, and he helped start their football program. Tragically, this coach died in a plane crash a year later. He was a traveling evangelist, had his own plane.
Really?
And his name was Lee Rockroyer. And so my dad then became the head coach for the next 3 years. So after those 4 years, and by this time we were 4 kids, my sister Donna, me, and then my sister Jenny, and my younger brother Tim, who was born in Lynchburg. And they felt called to go back to where they were raised, my mom and dad both, in Delaware County, to start a church. So in 1977, he planted Calvary Independent Baptist Church. He retires this month.
It's been there ever since.
Yeah, 48 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, your dad also played football at the Naval Academy
Correct.
too, right?
Yes. And he was quite good, yeah.
Yeah. There's a story behind, like, he played after, like,
Yeah, so Roger Staubach, anybody
Yeah.
that's followed the NFL that's in our generation knows who that is.
Yep.
One of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. He was a Naval Academy guy and won the Heisman. My dad started after him, broke all but one of his records. So, and, that was kind of a big deal. And there were some signature wins my dad's senior year. They beat Penn State. They beat Michigan. And that was Joe Paterno's first year as the head coach at Penn State. And but then they lost to like Rice and William and Mary. So it was like a weird year. They beat Army, which is always the most important thing. Always. And he had an opportunity to actually play professional football and was recruited. Things didn't quite work the way they do now with a big draft and all of that. But at that point, he felt really confident about his calling. And so he turned it all down and went and did his years of service and then went on and trained.
So he felt that calling before he even went into service, like in college.
Yeah, I think he got saved at 15 at an evangelistic rally in Delaware County. And so he was still a pretty young believer when he went off to the Naval Academy, but got some discipleship. And I think as his faith grew, he had a clear vision of what God wanted from him. I don't know that right away he knew that church planting was going to be what happened. I think that happened while he was at Liberty. And Dr. Jerry Falwell, the founder, was a big proponent of that. A lot of those early graduates in the seminary were church planters.
Yeah.
So as was he, of course.
Yeah. So as a pastor's kid then, growing up in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, was there, where do you think it landed for you as like, this is where I want to be? Like, I mean, did you grow up always believing and walking that journey?
Sure.
Or was there a season of just like,
It's interesting. It's a great question. I got saved at a really young age in Lynchburg, actually, and have never really doubted that or questioned that. I think the harder thing for me was when you grow up in the shadow of a pastor, a church plant, all of that. It's just always part of your life. And, at 53 now, I look back at those days and I don't have any hard feelings towards those days at all.
Right.
I feel extremely blessed to be raised in a family that loved the Lord. We were a part of the church. We served, whether we wanted to or not, if you know what I mean. But what happens, I think, sometimes in those situations is that it's not so much doubt. It's you get to this place where you're not sure, is my faith my own? This has always been a part of who I've been.
Right.
I've never even really been given a choice in this sense, that being part of ministry. So if anything, my biggest struggle was, what does God want for me? What does God want me to be? If I had $1 for every time I was asked, are you going to be a pastor like your dad?
Right.
I wouldn't even need the free tuition at Liberty probably, but I wrestled with that a lot. And,
right.
To be fair to my dad, he never pressured me. If anything, I felt pressure, but maybe from others or just some sort of internal struggle. My brother's a pastor actually in Texas, and he has been for a long time.
What part of Texas?
He's in Temple, Texas, which is close to Austin, close to Waco.
Okay.
His daughters are at Baylor. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
He's a Philly guy, though, to the core, so he struggles with being out amongst the Cowboy fans. It helps that the Eagles are the top dogs right now,
right.
So he likes to give them a fair amount of trash talk, and that's part of who he is, too.
Yeah.
But to answer that question, I think it was a long journey for me to come to terms with who God's wired me to be, and never... To be honest, I've never felt a calling to pastoral ministry, even though I was called Pastor Cartwright this weekend. I'm not a pastor. I'm not ordained.
Right.
I have a teaching ministry. That's my heart.
Yep.
Teaching and administration. And I've been blessed for nearly 30 years now to be able to be in some sort of educational ministry.
Yeah.
It started at a private Christian school in Miami.
Yeah.
And then I was at Word of Life Bible Institute for 6 years where I got to teach, and now I've been part of the ministry at Liberty University for 15. So, and for me, when people ask me, how do you measure that? How do you measure effectiveness? How do you go home at night and say, man, I'm contributing to the kingdom? Liberty University has over 100,000 students, and a lot of them are School of Divinity students. And so I get to be part of something that builds these degree programs that train people for ministry.
Right.
So if you want to think about our pastor here at Sarasota, Pastor Blake, he is a pastor of a church. He is also teaches for us at Liberty on the side, and I get to be a part of training those professors. So I'm teaching teachers, but also I develop programs that are equipping and training people who feel called to be pastors. And so even though I don't have a direct pastoral ministry in my calling, the calling that I do have is a real Ephesians 4 calling, where I'm equipping,
right,
either directly with my teaching or in a less direct way where I'm designing entire programs,
right,
that are training people for ministry. So I do get a lot of satisfaction out of that. But it was a journey to come to terms with that and to feel free to not follow something I didn't feel called to follow. There
right.
was certainly some wrestling for me well into my years of graduate school.
Yeah. So after Liberty, was Miami next? Did you go from Liberty? When did you meet your wife and
so
all of that? So
two questions. They're actually very different answers, but I did go to Miami from Liberty when I finished my Master of Divinity in 1997. A friend of mine, he and I had been roommates, and we're still friends. He actually works at Liberty now, so we've been friends and stayed connected for these 30 years. He had gotten a job at a school in Miami-Dade County, and while I was finishing, he and I were chatting from time to time. Hey, this is a great place. If you really want an opportunity to get your feet wet with teaching, you ought to consider coming down here. I was single at the time, and opportunity presented itself, and I went.
Yeah.
So I was there for 6 years, from 1997 to 2003. Longer story with my wife. My wife's family actually got saved in my dad's church in Delaware County.
Get out of here.
So we have known each other since we were kids.
That's crazy.
Yes, and we weren't necessarily close friends, but we've known each other since we were little kids.
Yeah.
Long story short, God did a work in my wife's life after high school, and I would come home during the summer while I was in seminary, and she and I would hang out, and she was like a new believer. She had all these questions, and because I was going to school, I was more than happy to give those answers, and of course it got me time with her, so that was a bonus.
And she thought you were so smart.
Yeah, she sure did. The truth is, I wouldn't call it a discipleship relationship. It wasn't like that, but we were, I was just honestly trying to help her work through a lot of these initial questions she had in her walk with the Lord. And what started out as a friendship like that just grew over time slowly, and then budded into romance. And so, we got married in 2000. It'll be 25 years married.
Congratulations.
July 1st.
Congratulations.
So she was there for the last 3 years of my 6 years in Miami. So we got married halfway through my time there, to tie the two together.
Yeah. So after Miami, that's when you went to Word of Life. Now, you went to Word of Life here in Florida, or did you go? Because I know we talked a little bit, and there's Word of Life up in upstate New York.
Right. So Word of Life Ministry, they do multiple things. The one that a lot of people know about are their camp ministries.
Right.
But they also have something called a Bible Institute. And in the U.S., there are 2 Bible Institute campuses. One's in Hudson, Florida, north of Tampa by a few hours. And the other is in Schroon Lake, New York. Technically, it's Pottersville, New York.
Right.
And so I actually went there as a student in 1990 for my first year of college.
Oh, wow.
So, my life has come full circle multiple times.
Yeah. Our son has attended that one as well.
Nice. Yeah. And so I remembered the year with fondness, and when Kristen and I were talking and praying about, we knew Miami wasn't a long-term place for us for various reasons, and we inquired with Word of Life to see if they were doing any hiring. I wanted to teach, and they were hiring for a dean of men where I would have an opportunity to teach, and so we were able to go back there. You talk about a contrast on multiple levels. Cultural contrast from Miami to upstate New York. Weather contrast. You go from Miami, it's like here in a lot of respects, to multiple feet of snow at a time
for multiple months at a time.
Yes, and 6-7 months of winter weather. But a gorgeous place. I mean, one of the most beautiful places you'll ever go. Right smack in the middle of the Adirondack Park. And 3 of our 4 children were born there. We were there for 6 years. Loved our time there. We are big fans of the idea that you don't have to hate a place to leave it, and we still love Word of Life. But God's hand was really clear on the opportunity we had to return to Liberty in 2009.
Yeah. So 2009, you start back at Liberty, and you've had quite the journey there since then.
Yeah. I came back initially as a staff member. I knew that in order for me to get to Liberty, I might initially not necessarily get a faculty position. And so I started as a staff member working for what was then the School of Religion, and slowly have been doing different jobs since then. And now, I'm a chair for I'm an online chair is technically my title, and I oversee the online doctoral programs and the doctoral program directors.
And so what? That was 2000. When did you start that program?
That position, I've been in that position probably for about 6 or 7 years now, in various positions between 2009 and then. But I've been technically an online chair now for about 6 or 7 years.
Nice. And Kristen also works there as
Correct.
well.
So not only do my kids get the tuition benefit, but any dependents. So my wife, when we first moved to Liberty, went ahead and finished up her bachelor's degree.
Nice.
Which she had put off in so that she could have kids. And being a full-time mom does not really leave room for education, especially in the early days.
Yeah.
So when we got to Lynchburg, she went ahead and finished her bachelor's and then went right into her master's degree, got her MA in Christian apologetics. And so she also teaches for us online undergrad apologetics classes.
Fun.
Yeah, it is.
Fun. Now, let's talk about Blake.
Yeah.
Pastor
Let's
Blake.
do it.
Yes. So I wonder if do you have any good stories about this gentleman and that we can share with people?
Yeah, stories that we can share with people. That's a good way of filtering, I think. So Blake was, to start out, Blake's been here now for 6 or 7 years, which is roughly half of my time at Liberty. He's been here. So when I came in, Blake would have been a master's level student.
Right.
And the context for me getting to know Blake is he was a GA. He was a graduate assistant. He worked at first, I believe he worked for Dr. Elmer Towns, our co-founder, and he was the dean of the School of Religion at the time. And so Blake would have been responsible for these really large undergraduate systematic theology classes, more than likely, managing those large setups. But I mean, I always knew Blake as just a down to earth dude, in academics, like there are different, well, it's just like any field, there are different personality types, but sometimes you get academics, they're wound a little tight. Blake was not wound tight. The Blake you know now is a lot like the Blake I knew then, just a good guy. He knew he loved the Lord, but he loved to have fun. When I get to know Blake, we rubbed shoulders in the work environment some, and he in his role, he went from GA to staff, and when you're staff, you're assigned to work for people, and he wasn't always really thrilled about who he was assigned to work for,
right.
And it's just without getting into too many details. Blake would come to me and, I'd be like, dude, you're just, you'll be all right. Like, kind of try to encourage him, empathize with him, knowing the situation for what it was. The most time we spent together was actually after he moved here. When Blake was working at Liberty, he would put trips together for students. And that's actually become a part of what I do.
I was going to talk about that here in a minute. Yeah, but go ahead.
So because he had done trips and I was now doing a large trip to Israel, it was about, I don't know, maybe 90, 100 people. I actually reached out to Blake to ask if he wanted to go and be one of the faculty leaders on the trip. And so he's like, yes, I'll do it. And he brought his wife, Kelsey, as well on that trip. So we got to know him then. I got to know him a lot more. And again, he's got this great balance of, he's got a hilarious sense of humor, doesn't take himself too seriously, which is really important. And that, I think, endears people to you when you're like that. And that's definitely a quality of Blake's. And just a lot of fun storytelling. As leaders, I think sometimes students have this perception of leaders, but we would assign each other conversations at the different places, different sites,
right.
And then we'd give each other challenges like, okay, Blake, here's what was it? Maybe like, here's a porcupine quill, like there are porcupines over there, so you need to work this into your talk. And he'd be like, challenge accepted, and he'd get up there and he would give some sort of talk and he would find a way to do it. And that's like just funny. He told me a story once, so this is secondhand now. He was leading a trip in Germany and one of the faculty members had to leave early. And so Blake wanted to give him kind of a crash tour of the area because he had to leave. One of my colleagues, Kevin King, and Blake have both told me the story. So they're riding around the area in a bus. And Blake is picking out all of these like milestones and things and just making stuff up. All of it, like just completely made up, and the professor's like taking pictures and writing stuff down, and Blake's just completely believable, just telling the story, and we still laugh about that one. So we've had some good times. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. And it's what I love about just his character and his like he doesn't take himself too serious, right? And he loves the Lord But I always tell people, like, the same dude you see up on stage preaching every Sunday is the same guy that you see hanging out at his house. And you're not going to, there's no facade. There's nothing trying to be something different.
And by the way, I don't know that people always understand how rare that is.
Yeah.
Like, we've seen it all. And, from my spot at Liberty, we're exposed to a lot of different types of people in ministry.
Right.
And this isn't singling any one person out, but there's a mentality even in Christian ministry that, man, I'm really important and I need my own whatever, like special treatment.
Right.
And I don't know that lines up with a shepherd model. The metaphor of shepherd in the New Testament is anything but that.
Right.
John 10, Jesus describes himself as the good shepherd. He does it in contrast of the Pharisees that had just thrown somebody out of the temple for being healed on the Sabbath.
Right.
And so, sadly, even in ministry, there can be an arrogance and a mindset that, aren't I something awesome, and you should be really, really thankful that you get to have me. And I don't see that in Blake, so I'm really glad to see that.
Yeah, not at all. So I was pretty fascinated when we were talking about the trips that you led and just the amount of students and just what went behind the trip and then what happens at the trip.
Sure.
So can you just talk us through just maybe a little bit of what that looks like for you and just the preparation and the leaving and what happens when you're on the trip?
So trips serve different purposes.
Right.
You can have trips that are very like your typical short-term missions trip, very mission focused, very serve focused. And then you have trips that are the other end of the extreme, like a trip to Israel, that are much more experiential. We're going to walk where Jesus walked and see these holy sites. And then there are trips that are a little bit of both.
Right.
But we have this phrase, we're not just shepherding minds, we're shepherding hearts. So we always want to press towards the spiritual lesson being learned, even when we're not necessarily serving.
Right.
Trips are a lot of work, but they are very rewarding and worth it. Our process at Liberty is like a 13-month process to pull off a trip. You have to apply with the organization that puts the trips together, and it goes through all these approvals all the way up to the provost's office, especially if it involves coursework, which we try to offer courses as part of the experience.
Okay.
So a student can go and elect to take a course. They'll have some extra work to do, maybe some papers, some daily journaling, so that they don't just automatically get the course credit for attending the trip.
Right.
We put a budget together that varies. Obviously, a big driver of the cost is airfare. And then we try to make the trips as affordable as possible. And trips can be anywhere from 15, 20 students to we're taking a trip to Greece in January. We have 90 on that trip. And so we market these trips to students, both the residential student and the online student. And what we have found is that there's a real major interest in these trips with students, especially the ones that explore Bible lands.
Right.
So Israel, which we've had trouble getting to since the war, but Turkey, you've got Paul's missionary journeys there. You've got the 7 churches of Revelation, a lot of relevant Bible sites. Greece is also some of Paul's missionary journeys and church plants. Mm-hmm. We just did a trip to Jordan and Egypt. Jordan has Holy Land sites. They border Israel.
Right.
In all likelihood, Jesus was actually baptized on the Jordan River in Jordan. because it says he went beyond Bethany, which is in Jordan. You've got Mount Nebo, where Moses looked into the promised land and then died. So you've got a lot of Bible land sites in Jordan, and Egypt. Egypt is just amazing. There are so many ancient sites, and it was an amazing experience for us and for our students. You just can't appreciate the pyramids until you're standing and looking straight up a pyramid. The scale of a pyramid is so grand that when you look up the pyramid, you feel like you're looking at a skyscraper. Even though it's an angle, it's so big that it looks straight up. It's unreal. So students, they want to be able to visit these places. A lot of them are online students, so the opportunity to go with faculty and get to know faculty, to get to know fellow students, that's something that they don't get every day.
Right.
And so it appeals on that level as well. And we have found that it's just something that also contributes to the word we use in education is retention. Mm-hmm. And retention is a broader term in customer service. You retain clients or return customers. And so one of the key components in retention is engagement.
Right.
Are students engaged in the learning? Well, a trip is sort of the gold standard of an engagement. Like, they chose to spend an extra $3,000-$4,000 to go on these trips. And if they're an online student, as long as they can get to our departure airport, they can go.
Right.
So
now, is there like a learning component and all that on the trip?
Yeah. So there's multiple learning components, and what we do depends on the trip. So I'll give you two examples as a contrast. In Greece, we're specifically designed our whole itinerary around Paul's second missionary journey. So beginning in Acts 16, where he gets the Macedonian call to come over from what is now Turkey. Mm-hmm. He was trying to continue his ministry there, and the Holy Spirit prevented him.
Right.
And so he comes over, begins in Philippi, and then Thessaloniki, I have to say it like they do, and then works his way down to Athens, and then there's Corinth, all right there. So we will follow that path, and our goal is at any site like that, the tour guide will give their talk, everybody wears the earpieces,
right.
But our professors that are there will all come prepared to add a layer to that. And the goal that I always give the professors is, look, you're not there to do the tour guide's job. We try to hire tour guides who are Christians because that adds a dimension to the experience.
Yeah.
What I want faculty to do is to get up there and tie that head learning directly to Scripture and directly to the heart.
Right.
And so that happens at all these sites. And then every night we do what's called a debrief, where we talk about the day. We have usually a devotional time with them, and then we talk about what's going on the next day so that they come prepared. To use a different trip, there's a trip to Rwanda that I lead every other year. And a lot of that trip is learning about what ministries look like in other cultures. So you're used to a church in America, and in the West we do things very differently. Let's go to a church in the hills of Rwanda, and let's go see how believers worship Jesus here. So different, and they love it. I mean, they're up and jumping around and dancing.
Eye-opening experience, right?
And there's a couple big themes from the trip. One is, what do we take for granted,
right,
in where we live? And these people are, and when I say poor, I mean poor by even Rwandan standards, and they're content, they have joy, they love Jesus. And so you're always leaving there more full than when you came. You go thinking, I'm going to give, and you leave when, no, I was given so much more than I gave. The other big piece to our trip to Rwanda is actually connected to the genocide of 1994. Without getting into the history of it, the Hutus and the Tutsis. The Hutus killed nearly 1 million Tutsis in 100 days in the spring of 1994. It had been brewing for decades, really, ever since colonization and the categorization of these people groups that didn't exist before,
right,
which led to a lot of jealousy and envy and hatred. And really, if you follow the process of what Nazism did, the eugenics of measuring features and separating races and things like that, and classifying people made in the image of God as basically worthy of nothing but death. That's what happened there.
Wow.
The Europeans came over and did the exact same thing. You can walk through the Genocide Memorial, and they have the videos of them measuring their features and classifying them and creating separate groups,
Wow.
which led to class warfare and led to this.
Yeah.
All that to say, this is now 30 years ago, 30 plus years ago, and Rwanda was decimated. I mean, truly decimated. And yet it's a growing country, and it would blow your mind how well they're doing since then, and the role that reconciliation and forgiveness has played in this.
Right.
It's really powerful. And so we take students to a village called the Village of Reconciliation that the government helped establish. And after the genocide, they couldn't build enough prisons to hold people. So they needed a different plan. And so they were given, after a period of time in prison, an opportunity to confess their crimes and to seek forgiveness as a way of shortening their sentence and as a way of being restored to society.
Oh, that is different.
And yes, and the world was a little critical of it, but ironically, the world really didn't do a whole lot to help prevent the genocide. So why were they feeling like they had the right to say how Rwanda would deal with it afterwards?
Right.
All that to say, we got to go visit this village where these survivors and their families live, and perpetrators that were part of the genocide live in co-op together. They work together, they plant their gardens together, they intermarry. And so you go and you sit down, and one person gets up and talks about his experience as a murderer. And you're standing there, and sitting among the students are also people that were murderers. And the students don't go there. I don't really give them a lot of this in advance. I want them to just experience it.
Yeah.
And so you could see them start to squirm, like, what's happening right now? And then he tells the story, and then he tells the story about how he was raised to believe, raised to hate. That's all he ever learned. And it was just part of who he was. But he doesn't make excuses. He says, I know in my heart it was wrong, but I did it. And then someone who's a survivor gets up and tells her story. And then you hear about how she lost her entire family. On one of the trips where we did this, so it's not really considered polite in their culture to ask people about the genocide.
Right.
It's not that they're unwilling to talk about it. It's just, imagine if you had survived this, how painful these memories would be.
Right.
And if you don't have a relational context with these people, you just want to walk up and just cold call.
That would just be super weird.
Yeah, but people can be super weird.
Oh,
So
yeah,
we teach our students in advance, look, it's not polite to talk about this, and you will have an opportunity. And so it's at this village where students get an opportunity to ask questions. And I tell them, look, this is your time to ask questions. And students ask questions, and they ask some hard questions. How did you get to a place where you felt like it was okay to kill people? And this guy stands there, and he's polite, he answers the question. One student asked, so the perpetrator had told his story, and then the survivor got up and told her story, and then they're standing side by side next to each other. And I'll never forget, one time a student said, do you ever see the person that killed your family? And she said, yeah, he's standing right here.
Wow.
You cannot come close to describing this to people. You have to be there moment. And there aren't too many tangible illustrations of the gospel that are better than that.
Yeah.
When you're talking about someone who killed basically her entire family, and we don't understand culture there, but collectivistic culture it's very community oriented. We're very individualized in the West here.
Yeah.
We don't do community well. I know we talk about it, but we really don't do it well.
We talk about how we should be doing it.
Right. But like they have entire community days there. The last Saturday of every month, it's called Umuganda. It's the law. The entire country closes. Everybody goes out and cleans up their community. They fix roads. And it's just an example of this is who we are.
Yeah.
You don't get to pick your profession. The needs of the community are greater than the desires of the individual. And so if you want to be a doctor, but we need teachers, guess what? You're going to be a teacher. That's what we need. And there are advantages and disadvantages to that, I would say. But all that to say, to come back to the genocide, imagine a scenario where the only way people knew which group someone was in is the community, the neighbors.
Right.
And so these weren't like people that would come from miles away and come in and kill people. These were neighbors killing neighbors. And so when you came back to a community after all this, you knew what happened. It wasn't like there's a good chance you would have known the people that killed your family. And so this wasn't really that out of the ordinary. It was just a mind-blowing moment that like, yeah, he's standing right here. But now that I think about it, having been there a few more times, I'm like, well, of course she knows the guy that killed her family. There's a good chance he babysat for them at some point. That's kind of how that works. So anyway, your original question is there a spiritual component? You bet there is. I mean, and students do journaling as part, like one major assignment was we have them journal their experiences. Yeah. And so I always read with great intentionality that particular section of the journal because students always talk about, and the challenge is, there's really two challenges I give students. Like, if this can be forgiven, like what thing are you holding on to that's bigger than this? Like, and there's family. Like, goodness, nothing. And the other is the role of propaganda and what it does to our minds. And I said, I always give this illustration right after the memorial. I said, did any of you see how much they highlighted the role of propaganda in influencing people to act a certain way? Right. And it was radio and print media. The web, the internet was just getting off the ground, but definitely not in Rwanda at the time. And I said, I want you to think about something. All of you have a news channel that you go to when you watch the news. And then they're nodding. And I said, and I'm not here to judge which news channel you watch, but you choose to watch that news channel because that's the frequency you're tuning into. That's the voice you're tuning into. I said, just for fun, have you ever gone to the other news channel? Like, if your news channel is more liberal, have you ever tuned into Fox News? Or if your news channel is more conservative, have you ever tuned into MSNBC? Right. To give obvious contrast, right? Yeah. Not saying one is better, one just for sake of conversation. I said, and if you tune in there long enough, you'll hear them begin to describe you and your positions. And they're nodding. And I'm like, have you ever sat there and go, man, that doesn't represent me at all? And they're nodding. Yeah. And I said, okay. I said, so if that's true of the other channel about you, then why can't you understand that that's probably also true for the channel that you prefer about the people you disagree with? And I said, all they're doing is they're creating these caricatures of each other, and we're not talking to each other. With social media, it's easy just to put people on blast and and I said, all they're doing is dehumanizing people so that it's easier to hate these people. It's easier to not see them as created in the image of God. And that's what happened here. They saw these people as cockroaches, literally. Yeah. And it didn't make it easy, I can't imagine, to kill. But by the time this happened, propaganda had so been ingrained in them that they don't look at these people as humans anymore, certainly as not created in the image of God. I said, we have to be careful. Well, like, this is the takeaway. Like, go home and sit down with somebody that you disagree with politically and get to know them as a person. And I said, because if you don't think this can happen again, you're kidding yourself.
Yeah.
Like it can happen again. And,
Yeah.
you get a lot of head nods. And so anyway, that's the other big thing that I think. So contrast that with something like Israel or Greece. It's still very spiritual, but we're talking about
A whole nother level.
this massive tragedy that very few people even know about.
Yeah. So your position at Liberty now has the opportunity for you to do remote.
Yeah.
So what is next with the Cartwright family?
Yeah, it's a great
crew?
question. Because everybody that I work with directly that like answers to me or that I oversee, they're all somewhere else. And so we began to ask this question a couple of years ago. It started at, where do we want to be in retirement? Is Lynchburg a place where we want to retire? And Kristen and I are beach folks. I mean, just grew up an hour from the Jersey Shore.
Right.
And we just love it. And so it went from, we want to do that someday, to maybe when the kids are done college, to maybe when they're all done high school, to, there's that opportunity between Asher's 8th and 9th grade year. And that's where we are now. I've been given permission to work remotely now. And then with that, the idea would be that as long as it's a state that works well with Liberty, that I would have the flexibility to move us. And so we're praying about it. We feel pretty strongly at this point that this is a good, blessed direction.
Yeah.
It helps tremendously that Bedrock is here, because we do want to be plugged into a body of believers, not just as an appendage, afterthought. Hey, yeah, we should probably go to church too, not just the beach.
Yeah.
Like really, want to be part of something like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, listen, John, it's been great having you today, and thank you so much for taking the time and just, being able to chat for a while.
Sure thing.
And we're looking forward to seeing what God has in store for you and the family this next journey coming down the road. For those of you that attend Bedrock, or if you're looking for a church here in the Sarasota area, Bedrock would love to have you visit. We have at 8:45 and a 11:15 service every Sunday. Thank you for joining the Applied Podcast, and we'll talk to you soon.